Now, we take delight in various things. Some people take delight in their possessions. Some people take delight in some activity or some hobby. Some people take delight in their home. They love their home, they love their gardens, and that's their delight. Some people even take delight in food, like people like me. We love food. I just came back from Turkey where they even have Turkish delight. And it's all, starch and sugar, and I love it. It's not good for me, but I still love it. But this morning, being Mother's Day weekend, we're talking about taking delight in our children and our grandchildren. The message is not just for moms. It is also for dads. In fact, it is for the whole family, and it's a very important message. You have your Bibles? Go ahead and find the book of Proverbs, chapter 3 and verse 11. Proverbs, chapter 3 and verse 11. Life will give us plenty of reasons to despise our loved ones, our family, especially our children, our grandchildren. Give us plenty of reasons. They will hurt us, disappoint us, choose a different path, refuse to forgive or refuse to receive forgiveness. Whatever, there are plenty of reasons to say, I just don't want to deal with you. I wish you were not in my life. And the strong word despise is so real. I just hate it. Instead, we are to delight in them. And to do so, we will have to see them, our children, our grandchildren, as God sees us, even when He disciplines us. We have to see our family and our loved ones through the heart of God the Father and through the cross of Jesus Christ. If not, bitterness, unforgiveness, lack of reconciliation will remain, and this is the trademark of our world. Proverbs chapter 3, verse 11. My son, do not despise the chastening of the Lord, nor detest His correction. For whom the Lord loves, He corrects, just as a father the son in whom He delights. Hence the title of the message, Delight. The book of Proverbs is the collection of the sayings of King Solomon. King Solomon was the wisest person who ever lived other than Jesus Christ. Proverbs are short sayings that teach us how to deal with practical, everyday, ordinary issues of life. Some people treat Proverbs almost as second class. So here you have the book of Genesis, and then you have Proverbs. Or you have Isaiah and Jeremiah, the prophets, and then the Proverbs. You have the Gospels or Paul's letter to the Romans or Ephesians and Colossians and even the book of Revelation. And way down here are the Proverbs. But that's not how the Bible sees the Proverbs. Proverbs are very important. And in fact, they are on the same level as the law and the prophets. Here's a passage, Jeremiah chapter 18, verse 18. It says, for the law shall not perish from the priest, nor counsel from the wise, that's where the Proverbs come in, nor the word from the prophet. So pay attention to the different genres. Law from the priest, counsel or wisdom or proverbs from the wise, and word from the prophets. So they are on the same level. Personally, I've known a lot of people who are theologically very knowledgeable. They know everything in and out of the Bible. They're doctrinally very sound. Man, I know exactly where they come down. They're right on. But when it comes to their personal lives, they're a mess. What happened to them? Why are they that way? They don't know how to lead their families. They don't know how to manage conflict because conflict is a natural part of life. They don't know how to handle that. They don't know how to handle their finances. Hence, God gave us this book called Proverbs. If you notice right here, it is sitting right in the middle of the Bible so that you would read it. Billy Graham, in the early days of his ministry, used to read one chapter from the book of Proverbs every single day of the month. You know, there are 31 chapters. So he would read somewhere in Genesis or Psalms or Luke or Romans, whatever. But then he would read one chapter from the book of Proverbs because it is full of wisdom. How to deal with yourself, how to deal with people, how to deal with temptations in life. So moms and dads, especially young moms and dads, if you're struggling or if you're having difficulty, in fact, for all people, doesn't matter if you're mom or dad or not, read one chapter from the book of Proverbs and do that for the next year. That will be about 12 times, right? 31 chapters, one per day of the month, 12 times. I promise you at the end of the year, not that you will be the all-wise one, but you will have a lot of wisdom. This is what the book of Proverbs is all about, especially when it comes to parenting. Now, Solomon wrote those Proverbs as letters to his son. In fact, pay attention to how the book begins. Proverbs chapter 1, verse 1, it says, the Proverbs of Solomon, the son of David, king of Israel. Now drop down to verse 8. My son, hear the instruction of your father, and do not forsake the law of your mother. Means Solomon is writing these words to his son. Where did he learn to do this? Where did Solomon get this training? Did he get it from David? Maybe. Personally, I doubt it. If you know anything about David's life, the early life of David was full of turmoil. Some of it was his own making, but most of it was because of King Saul. King Saul was so envious of David that he spent time chasing him from one ravine, valley, whatever. He was always after David. David could never have a chance to sit down and breathe. How could you raise a family like that? Where is dad? He's running for his life again. When is he going to be back? Who knows? And in fact, Saul did something kind of crazy. He gave his own daughter, Michal, as a wife to David. Why do you think he did that? So he could control David. So if he's married to my daughter, how can he usurp my throne? How can he come against me? Because it's all in the family now, so I can control David. But quickly he realized that was not a good decision because David and Michal actually fell in love. And Michal actually protected David when her own dad was trying to kill her husband. So Saul got angry with Michal, and here's what he did. He took her and gave her to another man. Now, we've all had, tough times in our marriages with in-laws, but how many in-laws can say that? How many people can say that? My father-in-law took my wife and gave her to another man. I mean, that's what happened to David. Now, that's tough. So imagine living like this, that my wife is now with another man. Why? Because her dad did that. And then later on, they reconciled and all that. But then David, now we find out he was married to 8 wives. The second one was Abigail. If you remember, she was the wife of the evil Nabal. Remember, Nabal would not help the troops and all that stuff, and then God killed him, and then David married Abigail. She was a very wise woman. But that's not enough. Who do we know next? A woman by the name of Bathsheba. David saw her, committed adultery with her, and then tried to get her husband killed and got him killed. And through David and Bathsheba, a child was born, and as you know how the story goes, that child died because of their sin. And then they went on to have 4 more children, of whom one of them was Solomon. Would you agree with me that Solomon came from a dysfunctional home? I would say that. Because that's just 3 wives, but then David went on to have 5 more wives, and many concubines that we don't even have their names. Altogether with his 8 wives, David had 21 children, 20 boys, 1 daughter. But no one knows the count of all the children through his concubines. It may be in the hundreds. This is, by the way, the same man who wrote Psalm 23, okay? This is the same man who's known as the man after God's own heart. This is the same man who was going to be the king through whom the Messiah would come. Nonetheless, what a dysfunctional home. And if that's not bad, as the kids began to grow up, did David become a good dad? No. Here's what happened. One of his sons, his adult sons, okay, these are not little kids, adult sons by the name of Amnon, forced himself on his sister. Now that's not only embarrassing, but that's also illegal. What did David do? Nothing. He just sat back. In fact, the Bible says he got very angry, but his family kept saying, you have to discipline Amnon. You have to address this situation. You know what many families do is they say, we're just not going to talk about it. Everybody knows there's an issue. There's a problem. You have to address this. By the way, parents, whether your children are little or adults, if you don't address situation, that's one of the most frustrating things that they have to go through. And one of David's sons by the name of Absalom got so angry, he said, I cannot believe my dad is not going to say something about this. I will. And then 2 years later, he had his own brother killed. This is the same King David. And if that's not enough, Absalom was still not satisfied. And by the way, there was a rift in the family. David refused to forgive Absalom, albeit David did not address the situation. But your son did, but now you don't want to forgive him because he killed your other son. Finally, they reconciled, but Absalom was, you know what? Dad doesn't deserve to be the king. I do. And he led a coup against his own father. Now, that's painful, by the way. When your own children lead a movement to dethrone you. And there was a war. David had to flee Jerusalem. He had to run from his life. Who's he running from? His own flesh and blood. And Absalom said, I will kill you. And in the end, here's what happens. Absalom did not kill David, but Absalom ended up dying a horrific death in the forest. Remember, he got his hair caught and they speared him as he hung there. And David went into mourning. I mean, I would say it's a dysfunctional family. And if that's not enough, David had another son by the name of Adonijah who also said, Dad doesn't deserve to be on the throne. He tried to usurp his father's throne. And again, what did David do? Nothing. You see, Solomon grew up in a situation like this. I would categorize that as a dysfunctional home. Now, what is a dysfunctional home? According to psychologists, psychiatrists, a dysfunctional home is a home, listen very carefully, where there is addiction. Now, in our culture today, we kind of say, oh, it's not a big deal. Everybody does it, it's just casual, whatever. But addiction happens, we just don't call it by that name. A dysfunctional home typically has addiction problems. A dysfunctional home also has abuse and neglect. A dysfunctional home has personality disorders. One moment like this, another moment like that. A dysfunctional home also can have emotional incest. There's a healthy relationship. Here are mom and dad, here are children. But emotional incest is when it's weird, it's not right. And that is a dysfunctional home. We don't call it that, but that's what it is. A dysfunctional home is also a place where there is toxic parenting. They never learned the right way, and so they carry it on with their children, but it's not the right kind of parenting. There's high conflict, which means every single day we're going to fight about something. In many homes, that is a normal thing. Normalcy is where we're always fighting. Do you love your family? Oh, yeah, I love my family. Do you love your parents? Yes, I love my parents. Do mom and dad love each other? Yes, they do. But they always fight. Every day there's a new fight. What are we going to fight about today? Something's going to happen and making a mountain out of a molehill, and before you know, there's a fight. There's an argument. Then we're going to come together, and then there's a fight. A dysfunctional home is also a place where emotional manipulation happens. What is emotional manipulation? By the way, it also happens in Christian homes. Means I don't like what you're doing, so I'm going to withhold affection. I'm going to keep you at a distance. I'm going to do this and I'm going to do that. Parents do that to their children. Listen carefully. Children do that to their parents. It's called emotional manipulation. Here's a word for those of you who grew up in dysfunctional homes. Yes, it matters how you grew up. It is so much better when we grow up in a God-honoring, Christ-centered, Bible-believing, Spirit-filled home. I'll repeat that again. It is so much better when we grow up in God-honoring, Christ-centered, Bible-believing, and Spirit-filled home. Having said that, God can still work in your lives. You don't have to go through your whole life blaming your past. Because some people do that. Their whole life is, I am the way I am because of that. Not for a single moment will I say that what happened to you or the abuse or the trauma that you went through is no big deal, because it is a big deal. But if you constantly go back to that and say, that's it and that's all there is going to be, there is a point where there's a choice you make and say, in spite of this, I'm going to trust in God for His grace. I'm going to lean upon Him because other than that, I can't make it. I need God to help me. And you're here this morning, I don't care what age you are, this message applies to you. If you grew up in this dysfunctional type home, that you will lean upon God instead upon your story. A lot of us have a story and we constantly tell our story. This is my story. This is who I am. How long are you going to do that? Some point in time, let God write your story. Say, God, this has happened to me. It's real. It is painful. It is not good. But I want you to write my story. And unless you rest in God's grace, you're going to go through life, and here's what's going to happen. You're going to pass it down not only to your children, grandchildren, but to other people who come into your path. Here, I was hurt, so I'm going to hurt you. This morning, Solomon grew up in a dysfunctional home. Nonetheless, he is sitting at that table. I don't think it was in a throne room. I believe it was like a dining table. He is talking to his son. And what does he say? My son, hear the instruction of your father and do not forsake the law of your mother. You know what I like about this guy? He was truly wise. He could have been unite against all the parents of the world. All parents are hypocrites. Mom and dad are By the way, that's not new news, okay? Did you just figure that out, that all parents are hypocrites? It goes all the way back to Adam and Eve. They were the first parents and they were hypocrites. God told them not to eat of this tree, and what did they do? We're going to eat. And then after they ate, and God said, what have you done? Adam blamed his wife. And ever since then, men have been blaming somebody, right? It's only if you had done that, if only you had put that away, if only that wasn't there. And then what happened to the second generation, Cain and Abel? What happened? Cain killed his own brother. I mean, that's a dysfunctional home. So we started out dysfunctional. So please, all you families out there, stop pretending that you are perfect, okay? None of us are. People look at us and go, wait, I mean, you had a good... No, we all have our skeletons. We all had our bad memories. In spite of those things, what I like about Solomon is that he is not talking down about parenthood. He actually extols it. He actually praises it. In Proverbs 3:12, for whom the Lord loves, He corrects, just as a father, the son in whom He delights. How much do you think David showed delight in Solomon? But he says that. Proverbs 10:1, a wise son makes a glad father, but a foolish son is the grief of his Who was Solomon's dad? Who was his mom? Bathsheba. He could have gone his whole life and say, yeah, mom acts all spiritual, but you know how they met. He doesn't do that. He's actually bragging on his mom and dad. Here's another one, Proverbs chapter 23, 22. Listen to your father who begot you, and do not despise your mother when she is old. I want to say something here. Please listen very carefully. Is that the position, the office of parenthood, mothers and fathers, Solomon is holding it up in high esteem. Have you ever noticed the 10 Commandments? That right in the middle of the 10 Commandments, God put a very interesting command, which is what? Honor your father and your mother. Here's the first 3 focused on God. Don't make any other God, no other graven image. Don't take his name in vain. Honor the Sabbath, keep the Sabbath. But then, way down here is all about don't murder, don't commit adultery, don't covet, all of that. But in the middle, it is honor your father and your mother. But then he says that your days may be long upon the land which the Lord your God is giving you. It is the only command with a promise. There is no promise to the first 3 or 4, and there is no promise to the last 5 of them, but this one has a promise with it. In a sense, God is saying, I want you to honor your father and your mother because it pleases me. And if it pleases me, I'm going to bless you. Why is this command so important? Jewish tradition has something to say about this. In fact, a rabbi by the name of Daniel Lepin, who wrote a book called Thou Shalt Prosper, great book, by the way, he says it is not surprising that to Jewish culture, the relationship with your parents captured in the 5th commandment lays the foundation for the science of human relationships. Your family is the microcosm in which you learn how to live in this world. That little home with mom and dad or mom, you learn how to live with your neighbors, how to work with people, how to even deal with strangers. This is where you learn how to do that. How amazing it is, God put it right in the middle. Here's about God, here's about people, but in the middle, those people who oohed and awed and gooed and got over you when you were born, you got to honor them. By the way, I want you to think through with me for another minute or two. Why is that command so important? Why did God put it almost like a hinge? Because whatever your parents have, in a sense, right, it comes down to you as children. It's the natural way. Unless parents, you spend it all, okay? It's supposed to come down to your children. So you don't really have to honor your parents because you're going to get their stuff anyways. So God says, I'm going to put a command on top of that, just in case you take them for granted. And that idea, I want you to honor them because it makes me happy, is the foundation on which how we treat people. How should I treat you? Well, I can treat you any way I want to. I can punch you in the face. Why should I do that? Because it's God sees everything. I can go over there and run into your car. Why shouldn't I do that? Well, it'll damage me, but still, why can I throw a rock into your windshield? Because it's not the right thing to do. When you commit murder, what happens? You go to prison. When you steal, what happens? You go to prison. But here's the only one. You do this because it is right. So now we learn how to deal with people in society. Do this because it is right. And by the way, the further we get away from this book, the further we get away from God's commands, our world is becoming crazy. Isn't that amazing that it's all hinged on this? Why do people do what they do? Why are they so random? Is because we're getting away from God's commands. And what is interesting here is this. It's honor your parents, which means you will not always obey your parents. There comes a point where your kids will do what they want to do. And kids, adult kids, even if you don't obey your parents, you're always to honor their position. You say, well, you have no idea what my mom's like. You have no idea what my dad's like. Man, I don't even know my dad. I don't even know my mom, or whatever it is. You still have to honor that position. Solomon was honoring the position, even though his dad and his mom had such a rough beginning. Now here's the next question. What we're doing is we're looking at this verse, Proverbs 3:12, for whom the Lord loves, he corrects, just as a father, the son in whom he delights. We're looking at it from all different angles. It's like holding up a diamond and just turning it, or going around it from different angles. What is the meaning of the word delight? Just as a father, the son in whom he delights. How do you delight in someone? You know, when I first came to America, came to the South, I heard a lot of phrases, and one of them was tickled pink. Never heard that, never used it. I said, how do you do that? How do you get tickled pink? Sometimes people think the word delight means you just tickled pink. You just like all giddy over your kids. Is that what that word delight really means? So how do you figure out, how do you delight in your children? What you have to do is you have to go into the Bible and find the word delight and figure out how it was used. And you cannot do that just in English. What many times people do when they study the Bible is they go, oh, there's a word here, there's a word love, or there's a word hope, or there's a word delight. I'm going to go to the concordance and find every time the word delight is used. Here's one problem. When people translated the Bible, they do it by committee. Committee meaning there's a group of scholars will come together and they'll say, we want these three guys to translate the book of Genesis. We want these three scholars to translate Exodus or Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy, or in the New Testament, Matthew, Mark, Luke, John. These three, these four, these five will do these sections. So what they do is they come to the Hebrew or they come to the Greek and they translate those words to the best of their ability. And many times they use the word delight, but there's a different Hebrew word behind it. Here's what I did. If I want to know what Proverbs 3:12 means when it says the word delight, I'm going to go back to the Hebrew and find every time the Hebrew word behind it is used and then see the context. And the Hebrew word is ratzah. R-A-T-S-A-H as transliteration is the word ratzah. So I went to see what does it mean, and it's not tickled pink, okay? Here are some examples very quickly. The first one in our relationship with God. In Deuteronomy 33:11, it says, bless his substance, Lord, and accept, here's the word ratzah in Hebrew. Bless his substance, Lord, and ratzah the work of his hands. In the context, it is referring to the Levites, the Levi family. Remember, Jacob had 12 sons. One of them was Levi. But why is it saying bless him and accept him? Because he had done a lot of things and his descendants had done a lot of things to disappoint God. They were the ones who tested God in the wilderness. They were the ones who failed to acknowledge their own parents, his siblings, and children. Nonetheless, God still accepted them. Don't miss this. A delightful home is a place where you will not approve someone's behavior, nonetheless you still accept them. The action, the behavior is contrary to our values, biblical values. We don't approve that, but you are still accepted. You are still our child, and that's all there is to it. A delightful home is a place where we are accepted. Let me just stop there for a moment. Don't raise your hands. But did you grow up in a delightful home where parents did not approve, but they accepted? You as a person. Here's another example, Isaiah 60 verse 10. For in my wrath I struck you, but in my favor, the word is ratzah. In my favor, I have had mercy on you. In the context, it's about God's unfailing commitment towards his people, even though when he had to discipline them. A delightful home is not a place where whatever you want to do, you just have the freedom. No, there are times that you'll be corrected. You will be disciplined appropriately. A delightful home is a home where there is discipline. No, you can't do that. No, there are consequences to that. Now, since you did that, these privileges are gone. You see how our idea of delight is, oh, well, whatever, it's okay. Well, when I was young, I made mistakes too, so it's all fine. There is discipline in delight. Here's another example, Psalm 103, verse 21. Bless the Lord, all you his host, you ministers of his who do his pleasure. In this context, the whole psalm is about God's mercies in our lives. If you read the psalm, it'll tell you how delight is a sense of mercy. Oh, I can get you. Oh, I got you. I know what you did, and I'm about to nail you to the wall. Nonetheless, I'm going to deal with that situation, but still show mercy. That's a delightful home. I remember when I was maybe 9, 10 years of age. I can't exactly remember the age, but Dad was at home in the afternoon. He would come home, take a nap, and then he would go back to work, and he would be, he was very hardworking. And I remember him coming home this one day, and he hung his pants on top of the door and got into his pajamas and was taking a nap. As I was walking past that door, I noticed his wallet. And what's more is I noticed some money in the wallet, and 1 rupee bill was kind of sticking out. So I was like, well, I love candy, still do. I said, maybe I can take one. It's just one, because I see some other ones in there. Not a big deal. If I just take one, he's not going to miss it. It's not a big deal. It's all good. So I took it, went and got some candy, got back home. That evening, as we sat down at the dinner table, I remember Dad asking that question. He said, so how was your day? That's not how Dad spoke. In our home, we didn't say, how was your day? We don't talk like that. It was just like, hey, did you do this? Did you do your homework? Let's make sure we can take care of this, whatever. How was your day? And in that moment, I knew, oh, great, he knows. And here it comes. I'm going to get a whooping. It's because I stole from his wallet. It's like a really extreme form of thievery. I stole from his wallet. Here's what happened. Nothing. He didn't say a single other word. He changed the subject, started talking about this, that, and the whole time I'm thinking, when is it going to be that he's going to say, I need to talk to you? Nothing. In his wisdom, he already knew that I knew and that I was very embarrassed, and the lesson had been learned. Now, I'll be first to confess to you, as a father, I didn't always follow that principle. But he did. And to this day, I knew the lesson, which is, don't do that. Why did he do that? Because through wisdom, he understood the value of mercy, that not I'm going to nail you now. Now you're going to find out, buddy, for doing that. No, none of that. Okay. Moved on. But I got the message. You see, a home that is delightful is a home where there is mercy that is offered, not condoning, but mercy is offered. And lessons are learned. The same word ratzah is often found in examples where human beings are mentioned. In Proverbs 16:13, righteous lips are the delight of kings, and they love him who speaks what is right. Means a king loves to hear and pay attention to words of truth and righteousness. A delightful home is a place where people are attentive. There was a time in my life that I felt like nobody cared. All kids do that at some point in time. They think they were adopted or something, they just found on the side of the road or something, and mom and dad don't love me as much as they love everybody else. Then when you grow up, you realize, when you have your own family, man, mom and dad really paid attention. In spite of how busy they were, they still had time to do this, that, and the other. How did they do that? It is so fashionable in our culture to sit back and say, my mom and dad, man, they didn't care. It was all right. Until you have your own and you go, wow, they worked so hard. They had none of the opportunities I have, and yet they did this and this and this and this and this. How in the world did they pull that off? Are y'all getting this message? So a delightful home is a place where there is attention given to even those details. And here's one more, the word, and I can go on and on, but I'm just picking some few. Genesis 33, verse 10, the word ratzah shows up again. And this time is in the interaction between Jacob and Esau. Remember, Jacob and Esau didn't get along, and Esau was angry with Jacob. And later on, Jacob had a lot of wealth, and he tried to give that to his brother Esau. And Esau said, man, look, I forgive you. I don't need all that money. I don't need all the animals. You keep it. Listen to what Jacob says. He said, no, please. If I have found favor in your sight, and then receive my present from my hand, inasmuch as I have seen your face, as though I had seen the face of God, and you were ratzah, you were pleased with me. The idea behind that is this: a delightful home is a place where there is reconciliation, there is acceptance, there is forgiveness. That word ratzah, one more, is found in the context of worship in Psalm 51, verse 16, where David is confessing his sin. He says to God, for you do not desire sacrifice, or I will give it to you. You do not delight, you do not ratzah in burnt offerings. What do you ratzah in? Verse 17, the sacrifices of God are a broken spirit, a broken and a contrite heart. Means what delights God is an environment where there is humility, there is a repentance, there is reconciliation. Is that the kind of home that you have for your children? Y'all don't get along. You go over there and you go over there. No, we're going to come back together and make it right. You see, the word delight can have a range of meanings. It has the idea of being fond of someone, being pleased with someone, accepting someone favorably, being satisfied with someone, showing mercy when you can nail them. No, I'm going to show you mercy. Even disciplining someone, that's all part of being delighted. Question for parents who have children at home. Can your children tell that you delight in them? Again, not tickled pink or all giddy over them. Can they tell that you delight in them, you accept them, you show mercy to them, you discipline them, but you teach them how to reconcile? Is your home a place where mercy is freely given? Is your home a place where unconditional love is constantly shown, even with little actions? One of the family traditions in our home was, summertime, mom and dad would take us for ice cream. And we would get these bowls of ice cream, come back home. And the tradition was we would quickly finish our bowl and then wait for mom and dad to give us something out of their bowl. I don't know why I wouldn't do that to my kids. I had a dad tax, which means I'm going to eat mine and then I get a spoon out of yours. But my mom and dad were different. They were like, after our bowl was empty, it's like, okay, here you go, here's some more. I mean, they never finished their ice cream. We always got their stuff. But that's just a little way of saying we love you. Can your adult children tell that you delight in them? And that's tough because sometimes adult children will make decisions and do things that will hurt you, that will disappoint you. Have you forgiven them? Have you, parents, have you accepted your new roles in their lives? Well, I would, but I mean, they're doing things. I can't agree with that. Well, they're different. And they will make decisions and they will make choices that mom and dads, if you raise them right, they will be free thinkers. By the way, do you know that's one of the signs that you raised well? Because kids will do something very different. Mom and dad have to go, I'm not talking about sin, but I'm talking about a job or something else. You go, well, I don't know, it's the wisest decision, but okay. I still delight in my children. And kids, here's the thing, parents. Your kids may not always appreciate what you have done for them. It takes time. When they go through their own circumstances, that's when they look back and go, oh, wow. I was the most naive kid in the world. I don't know how that happened. I was smart, but I was naive. My parents sent me to a Catholic school, very, very rigorous Catholic studies, study math, science, classics, all that. I didn't know that it was a private school where you had to pay for that. Every month, once a month, I remember seeing mom or dad or both would come by the school office. You know what I thought as a kid? They have a friend there. They come to see their friend. And then when I had my own kids and was sending them to Christian school, that's what I was like, oh, you got to pay for this. So mom and dad, the whole time we were complaining about why can't we have this and why can't we have that. They were paying for my tuition. Oh, my athletic fees, my resource fees, and all those fees. They were paying for that. When I had my own kids, that's when I realized, man, the sacrifices they were making. How did they pull that off? How did we never know that they were poor? In the first years of our lives, we hardly had anything. But mom and dad never made us feel that we couldn't have whatever we wanted. You see, when you go through life and face the same circumstances, and sometimes parents, don't worry if you don't have your children come back to you and say, Mom, Dad, thank you for what you've done. Don't worry about it, it's okay. Maybe in heaven they'll tell you that, okay? In closing, Jesus set the example of how to delight in your children. He was the ideal son. He pleased his father every step of the way. In Isaiah 42 verse 1, there's a prophecy that says, behold, my servant whom I uphold, talking about his son, God the Father says, my elect one in whom my soul ratsa, delights. Jesus brought delight to his Father, and the Father had delight in his Son. I have put my Spirit upon him. He will bring forth justice to the Gentiles. Now, Jesus never made mistakes. He was the perfect Son of God. He always did what the Father called him to do. And the Father is bragging on him. And when Jesus was doing his ministry, twice the Father opened the skies and said, this is my beloved Son in whom I am well pleased. Wow. See, that's our example, parents, moms and dads, to be able to say that about your children. This is my beloved Son in whom I am well pleased. And the Son truly pleased the Father. At the baptism, after Jesus came out of the water, the heavens were opened, the Spirit descended in the form of a dove, and suddenly a voice from heaven saying, this is my beloved Son in whom I'm well pleased. When he was on the top of the Mount of Transfiguration, again, a bright cloud came over them, and suddenly a voice from the cloud said, this is my beloved Son in whom I am well pleased. I'm so proud of him. That's beautiful, isn't it? Parents, don't forget to brag on your children, even when they get old. Older, the better. Even when they get older, don't forget. I remember when we went home to visit our family. Miss Lou helped us, she said, years ago now, 25 years ago. First time, we were there, and I was gone somewhere, and Nicole was with my dad. And she asked me the question she always wanted to ask, which is this, because after she got there, she realized, oh, wow, you have a big church, and your dad's been pastoring here. He is such a theologian and principal of a Bible college, all this. So she asked him that question. She said, how could you trust your son to marry somebody that you never met? I wasn't there, but my dad told her this, and later on she came and told me. She said, this is what your dad said. She said, it brought tears to my eyes. And I said, what did he say? He said, when it comes to small decisions, I've known Abidan to make mistakes. But when it comes down to the big decisions of life, I've never known my son to make a mistake. You're the big decision. Now, she told me that, and it just overwhelmed me, because that's how my parents raised me. They trusted me. In spite of my failures, in spite of my weaknesses, there was a level of trust. I trust him. It impacted how I was raised, and it is still impacting me today. As I go about life, those words keep reverberating in my mind, that when it comes to small things, yeah, he will make mistakes. When it comes to big things in life, I've never known him to make. You know how much confidence that gives you when you go out there and do things? This morning, as we go in our time of invitation, do you delight in your children, parents who still have kids at home? Do you have an environment of acceptance, forgiveness, reconciliation, discipline, mercies? Do you delight in your adult children? Children, do you honor your parents? Do you obey your parents? If you're still at home, you better obey. But if you're not, do you still honor? Solomon could have let his dad have it. Look at that adulterer. Look at my mom. Look at what she did. It takes two to tango. Look what she did. No, not for a moment. He honored that position. Do you do that? And this morning, through Jesus Christ, we have been grafted into the family of God. We don't have to keep talking about that baggage. You may have that baggage with you all life, but God's grace can help you overcome whatever you went through. And this morning, come to Jesus. Receive him as your Savior, as your King. Now you have access to the heavenly family. You have access to God's grace. Come to him. Be saved. And then make your home a delightful place. Whether kids there or not, delight in them.